I was drafted. I was in third year at UWM, University of Milwaukee, and every year they renew your student deferment, and they told me at that time that they were not going to renew it anymore, that I would be drafted. So I got my induction papers a week later, and then I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for basic training, and then after that I went to advanced infantry training, and then I went to Fort Benning, Georgia for non-commissioned officer training, and there I went to the West Coast, Washington State, I can't remember the fort, and I trained troops there for 9 weeks, and then I came home for a month and I went over to Vietnam. Get off in Bearcat, that's where we landed, and that's kind of a processing center. And I can remember the young men who were going home at that time shaking my hands and thanking me for replacing them. Kind of a joke, you might say. From there, I was transferred to Dong Tam, which is 9th Division headquarters. And from there, I went to a little teeny province called Yang Tram, which is about 150, 200 miles south of Saigon. And that's where my company was based. We were the 3rd of the 47th.
Okay. What was your primary role?
Search and destroy. We had a lot of intense fights. My first contact, I was a platoon sergeant because I had rank. And so being new in country, when you place yourself within a platoon, those members of that platoon have been there for maybe 6 months, 9 months, whatever. So you have to work with them. And then in turn, they train you and teach you the ropes, as they say. And our first contact that I had in Vietnam was we were crossing one of the major rivers. And each person had their own responsibility. Hansen was our riverman. He also carried our M60 machine gun. So he would be first to go across the river, and then he would tie it down to a tree, and then one by one we would come over. When the last person crossed, which was me, the NVA opened up on us on the beach. And so we were kind of pinned down, and at that time I thought I was going to die because the bullets were very close to us. It was late in the afternoon. And so there was about 13 of us. We were pinned down, and I remember having my face in the mud, trying to get as low as I could. So we called the Air Force for air power. And they dropped 500 7-pound bombs on that area where the NVA were. They were pretty much dug in. The delta was pretty flat and a lot of water, but this area was kind of hilly. So they probably bombed that for a good half hour. And then we were able to move forward, and then took a body count and retrieved any weapons that were there and stuff like that. That was the first time. Very frightening, but that kind of was an icebreaker for me. It kind of made you adjust to everything. The worst moment would be Tet, 1968, the Tet Offensive. They were expecting huge amount of NVA, 4 or 5 battalions. So they flew us in an area. It was during the dry season now, because that's when usually Tet takes place. When the NVA are going to attack you, they want to do it during the dry season. Otherwise, it's too hard to maneuver in the mud and the water and everything else. So we landed in a huge rice paddy. And I happened to learn Vietnamese. I wasn't real proficient, but I probably was maybe 40% proficient. And I have to tell you this because this kind of ties in with the story. And I heard crying in the distance. So I told the platoon that I would be back shortly because there was other U.S. Army and Marines were out there too. We were getting ready to go into Saigon. And I went over there, and there was a grandmother and the mother who were crying, and they spoke to me in Vietnamese, and they said that their children, they had 3 children, 3 girls that were in the bunker. And the GIs had thrown hand grenades in there. And that really bothered me. So I just decided I was going to go in the bunker. I was also a tunnel rat too, so I was kind of used to that. So the grandmother said, "Are you really going to go in there?" And I said, "Yes, we have to bring him out." So we brought him out, and one girl was 12 years old. She had died. And then there was a 5-year-old girl and I think a 3-year-old girl. And both those were pretty well wounded. Fragmentation just kind of tore their skins up. I actually cried there, and it was pretty bad. Grandmother, in respect for me, said that there was a huge amount of NVA in the area. And I thanked her for the information. I found that by knowing the language and approaching people and talking to them, it helped. People trusted you more than they would the average GI, let's say. So I went back to my unit and I told them what she had told me. And then our orders changed. They were going to take us out and move us into a more hot spot, the way it was. There was 2 companies of Army units that were pinned down and needed support. So when helicopters came in, we called them choppers, picked us up, and there was only about 13 of us, and for support. So they flew us in, and we landed into another rice paddy that was hot. In this case, we had to return fire because we were behind a dike. The dikes are higher above ground during the dry season because the water recedes all the way down. So we were hiding behind the dikes, and they were shooting mortars at us, and they were shooting automatic weapons at us. And I asked the 2 young men to load me up. And I looked over there, and they were crying. I brought back a memory to me when I was crying. What happened was, when you get pinned down like that, there's a code, and I don't remember the code anymore. It means that we're going to be annihilated if somebody doesn't help us, and that's all it was. So at that time, shooting all those rounds, I didn't have earplugs, so I was pretty well deaf. So we used hand signals, so by radio man, and we called it napalm. We had no choice. So there was a number of jets came over, and if you ever see napalm come out of a jet or plane, it tumbles. And it hit fairly close to us, but not close enough to hurt us. And you could just see the smoke, the flames. You could see people running on fire. And that suppressed them. They retreated. It was dark at that time now, and so there's some C-133 transport planes. Those are pretty heavy planes. They had 2 Gatling guns on it. We call them Puff the Magic Dragon. And they cover about every square inch, 1 round, every 3,000 rounds they're meant to come out, if not more. And all night long, the Air Force flew and protected us, and the other companies as well. And they dropped flare parachutes. They last about maybe 5 minutes max. Dropped those all night long, and they kept firing and firing and firing. It was really, really a wonderful feeling that we were going to survive, hopefully. So they did that all night long, and then in the distance I could hear moaning and crying. That was the enemy. And you think about it, that could be you, but they're human beings too, so you feel bad. Yet it's a war, so you're kind of torn between being compassionate and being hateful, And I'm kind of a compassionate person. So I felt bad for them. That morning we had to pick up bodies and weapons and stuff like that. So we survived that ordeal, thank God.
How did that change you?
Well, when I came back home, it's so hard because here you're in a war zone, another side of the world, and I had a fiancée at the time, and they're going to parties, they're going to school. It's like nothing's happening over there, and here you're in a war zone. So that stays with you all that time when you're in Vietnam. And I remember coming off the airplane in O'Hare Field, and at that time she was my fiancée, and my mom were there, and they had the suitcase. And the suitcase had my civilian clothes in it. I went into the men's room and I actually changed my clothes. And they didn't want any confrontation because back then the war was very unpopular and there was no welcoming committee or people there to welcome you off the airplane, other than your family. So I kind of stayed to myself for about maybe 5, 7, 8 years and just kind of buried myself back into school again and finding a job and going that route. You still think about it. Last night I was watching on YouTube the 9th Infantry Division. They had 5 clips about it, and it was pretty realistic, and it covered all the areas that I experienced. And then my wife came in and she says, "Turn that off. Why are you watching it for? You're going to get depressed." I said, "No, this is part of healing." So that's how it goes. You got little by little, you heal more and more.